You will never forget where you were on September 11, 2001. In the anxious aftermath, what member of Congress would not vote for something called the USA Patriot Act? Only one U.S. Senator, Democrat Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, urging that even as America addresses the demanding security challenges before us, we must strive mightily also to guard our values and basic rights, and warning that preserving our freedom is one of the main reasons that we are now engaged in this new war on terrorism. We will lose that war without firing a shot if we sacrifice the liberties of the American people. Back to the future. Have the noble-sounding USA Patriot Act and post-9/11 government surveillance and enforcement tactics cost us the way of life our founders promised? Let's ask the author of Battlefield America, The War on the American People, and A Government of Wolves, the Emerging American Police State, constitutional attorney, Rutherford Institute president, syndicated columnist, and host of the podcast Freedom Under Fire, John W. Whitehead. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, sir.
John, your book titles are provocative. Post 9/11, how is a government of wolves declaring war on the American people?
Well, actually, that term government of wolves comes from a quote by Edward R. Murrow, the great CBS commentator who fought McCarthyism in his day when the FBI was crashing into people's homes during the 1950s if they had some kind of leftist leanings or whatever they thought, and wrecking people's lives. People were committing suicide. And he made this statement. He said, a nation of sheep will beget a government of wolves. And what he was saying was, wake up, people. Get active in your government and stop allowing the government to, violate the Constitution. We have a beautiful Constitution. In it is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says the government is not supposed to be doing surveillance, watching us, or doing anything unless they have probable cause or some kind of reason for doing it. They were committing illegal activities. With the 9/11 and the Patriot Act, which allowed the FBI and the government to go into people's homes while they weren't there and download all the information on their laptops, their computers, listening on all the telephone calls, everything we're doing today. The NSA listening up to 100 million phone calls a year and recording them now. The post office is now photographing all of our mail, even opening some of it to see what we're doing. We've entered a state where the Constitution has become just basically a paper rag to the government. So we do have an enemy within, and that's a very paranoid government that we're dealing with here that's targeting people that I have defended for years. And some of the cases, we may want to talk briefly about a few of them, that show that if you say the wrong word today, you do the wrong picture on Facebook, Google, all these groups, Amazon has billion-dollar contracts with the government. They created all the intelligence clouds for the government.
Sure.
So you have a corporate state that's come together now, and they're watching everything we're doing.
You know, a techie nerd friend of mine told me that if a movie I've seen disappointed me, I should never email friends calling it a bomb. And in another interview of yours, I heard you speak of a client that the FBI busted based on a Facebook post. Talk about Operation Vigilant Eagle.
Operation Vigilant Eagle was leaked by the Wall Street Journal several years ago. And what it is, it's tracking the Department of Homeland Security and the Pentagon tracked all returning soldiers to this country because they're considered possible terrorist threats. The case that we handled was a young Marine named Brandon Robb who had been jogging early one morning on the Saturday in Richmond, Virginia. And he got home and he was typing on his typewriter. And this is a decorated Marine, by the way. He captured weapons from the Taliban, Al-Qaeda. He diffused mines for the soldiers. Well, he came back. He was in Richmond, Virginia. He was typing one morning, and he hears a knock on the door. So he goes out, and he sees all these cars in his front yard, SWAT teams coming at him, people in plain clothes with black ties. They said they were the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and the police. And this is a man who did not own a weapon, by the way. The most dangerous thing he had in his house, he said, was a Perry knife to cut his fruit with in the morning. And he came to the front door and he said, "What's up?" And they said, "We're concerned about your Facebook posts." They had been watching everything he was doing. He was opposed to Barack Obama's executive orders. He was very vocal about it. He, in fact, said the president should be arrested for doing that. He was also a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. And the FBI was watching everything he was doing, recording it, and they considered him an extremist threat. He was jerked out of his home, arrested, thrown against the fence, cut his back. They took him to the local jail where a psychiatrist gave him a 5-minute investigation. 5-minute investigation interview and concluded that he had mental issues because he was a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. And he was directly put into a mental hospital. His mother called us pleading for our help. I went into court and filed a lawsuit. We got him out in a week. A judge said he shouldn't be there in the first place. What I learned, though, these are called civil commitments. 20,000 alone in Virginia.
Wow.
Annually. They're putting people in mental hospitals that are just disappearing. This is what I call the old, these are models that we've seen in former regimes where if you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. But what I'm trying to tell people here and wake them up through my books and the work I do is that you're being watched. Be careful what you say on Facebook especially. You can get arrested and jerked out of your home and put in a mental hospital. They're saying up to 1.5 million people a year this happens to. Some statistics show that.
That's pretty scary, and we're not just being watched. You mentioned our phone calls. We know that they're at least being logged as metadata, possibly keyword scanned. Last week on this show, we talked about the Stingray device that acts like a cell tower and helps itself to our phones, thus our movements and our data. Anyone who leaves home today will be photographed, perhaps hundreds of times, by various camera systems, some government operated, other closed circuits like in banks. Is it a stretch to think that somebody could hack into and knit together all this surveillance like we see depicted in the Jason Bourne movies? Is that happening now by the government?
Oh, it's happening now, yeah. And again, like Google works with China on their surveillance systems. Google actually has contracts with the NSA. Amazon works with the Pentagon. All of it's being watched. When you post pictures on Facebook, algorithms are created. What they're doing is they're trying to come up with predictive policing, which, by the way, scientists and professors that look at it, how it's been practiced in years, say it's very inaccurate. They're kind of come up with an idea now. Facebook, they're watching your emotions on your face. Are you distressed? Are you this? You're that? And they will directly report you to local authorities. And also, police departments across the country and working with Amazon and their Amazon recognition software program, collecting all your facial images. They're watching social media. They're knocking on people's door. They're called knock and talks now, where in the middle of the night, policemen will be knocking on your door. People have actually come to the door with an umbrella. An old fellow did, thinking it was robbers, and he got shot through the door. These things are happening in America. And by the way, let me tell you something. We've got a standing army. There are 80,000 SWAT team raids occurring annually in this country where kids are getting killed. Up to 500 dogs a day are being killed, adults. But police crashing through doors, 80% for mere warrant service, where a policeman used to show up at your door and knock on the door to give you that warrant. But people are getting killed today. So George Washington and the so-called founding fathers warned, do not have a standing army in America.
Well,
I don't know if you've seen it. Some of the police today are actually wearing camouflage when they show up at your door,
well,
like the people in Iraq.
John, all of that hand-me-down war hardware that has militarized the local police really rubs our nose in a long-ago warning from a president who, ironically, was our very first supreme Allied commander in Europe during World War II. And anyone who's watching this, who is younger than you and I, might get chills hearing this warning against the then burgeoning war industry. Listen.
We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Well, that'll give you chills. John, you served as a military officer, so you've seen this Pentagon spending spree from the inside out. You have written that our military spends $32 million per hour, and we hear about surplus tanks parked in the California desert and the $70 ballpoint pens. Now the president wants to divert several $billion from the Pentagon to build this wall along the Mexican border. Do you think they'll scrape by somehow?
I think they always scrape by somehow. The military-industrial complex, we call it, is very, very strong. Again, I'm a former military officer, and I've worked with former NSA agents and stuff, and they tell me that, listen, it's what we call the deep state. 2015, when the FBI leaked that memo, basically, or the Intercept, I think, got leaked it through a FOIA request, we found out that there's this deep state thing on the 7th floor under the State Department that they said runs everything. And that's really basically with former military generals, the billionaires, and all those things that run our government. And it's heavily influenced by money. As we see in our country today, it's a corporate complex, basically, and we're seen as data bits now. And I'll tell you one thing I've noticed with some of these policemen that are in the SWAT team gear. They see us as they would see people if they were over in Afghanistan as enemy combatants.
Ouch.
That's why you're seeing more people getting killed. I mean, we've had mass shootings since 2015. There have been over 300 people killed, but in that same period of time, the police have killed over 4,500 people in this country.
Yeah, John.
And no one talks about that.
I'm out of time, but I'm glad we talked about it. And John W. Whitehead, thank you for stepping into the big picture.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for watching The Big Picture. I'm Holland Cook in Washington. Back next week, same time. Meantime, question more.